we have seen in recent years about Social Security, but most importantly, who are making the point that when the middle class of this country is disappearing, when senior poverty is getting higher and higher, the point that you and I and Senator Harkin and Rosa DeLauro and others have been making is that we are not going to balance the budget on the backs of the elderly, the children, working families, the sick, and the poor.
So major changes are being made to the monthly benefits. These changes will greatly affect millions of people across the nation. Democrats and Republicans are holding negotiations on whether all seniors, Social Security benefits, and VA beneficiaries should receive a $1,400 stimulus check this year. There are millions of people that are using food stamps each month, and they can expect major changes to their benefits this year. According to the USDA, most people who receive SNAP benefits will receive emergency allotments from their state this month. The federal government has approved emergency allotments every month since March 2020. This gives SNAP recipients additional support during the crisis. In March, millions of SNAP households will receive hundreds of millions of dollars in extra food benefits in addition to the regular SNAP benefits. And officials have said, we know that many rely on these additional emergency food benefits to get enough healthy food for themselves and their families. We also know that many Americans are struggling to meet their basic needs and need support during this time. So folks, it's important to know that SNAP recipients do not have to take any action to receive their supplemental benefits, as the benefits will be issued directly on their EBT cards. And SNAP is the largest federal food assistance program in the nation, with 1 in 7 Americans enrolled. In light of the crisis, which has exacerbated food insecurity and poverty, SNAP's benefits were substantially increased last year, under the reevaluation of the USDA's Thrifty Food Plan. And I know many of you are wondering how much benefits will be increased, but according to CNN, if beneficiaries live in the 48 contiguous states, and Washington, D.C., families of 4 will receive a maximum of $835. A family of 4 will also receive a maximum of $1,074 to $1,667 in Alaska. As of last month, a total of 37 states have enlisted to make their residents eligible for the enhanced SNAP benefits as part of the emergency allotment program. Most people living in those states were able to see the food stamp increase as soon as the beginning of this year. Progressive economists have long argued that SNAP benefits need to be greater in order to address the food insecurity crisis in the nation. The crisis, which wreaked havoc on the economy and flung millions of people into poverty, proved their point and understood the importance of the federal safety net. Even with a long overdue increase, many SNAP recipients are still struggling to get by, and typically through no fault of their own. The majority of working-age SNAP recipients have a job, but earn low wages and or work in unstable conditions. The crisis only made their oft precarious positions more fragile and dragged more people into the mix. But Congressman Josh Geiheimer recently held a press conference to sound the alarm on the massive IRS backlog of 6 million individual tax returns from last tax season. Josh Geimer told reporters, "I'm announcing that my taxpayer action plan to help fix the issue that led to this backlog at the IRS. Get these returns processed for Americans and get them their well-deserved taxpayer dollars in their pockets." The congressman is also urging the IRS to boost hiring and training process for taxpayer advocates, and he wants the head of the agency to report to Congress within 30 days with a plan how they can combat to clear the backlog. And right now 24 million American taxpayers are still waiting for the IRS to process their tax returns from last year, with many refunds being held up for 11 months. Delayed IRS returns and refunds are affecting millions of Americans and small businesses. When a tax return is delayed, that might mean a family cannot afford to pay down a mortgage or apply for a student loan. Experts have been warning taxpayers to expect serious delays from the IRS, which recently announced a second search team to address its massive backlog.
This is the gentleman from California. Seek recognition.
Unanimous consent to address the House 1 minute and revise extended remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, the national average for a gallon of gas is a little over $4, $4.06 to be exact nationally. Meanwhile, in my home state of California, the average gas price per gallon all across our state is $5.34. The first time ever, the average gas price per gallon is over $5 in every single California county. Now, I know California brings a lot of pain upon itself, self-inflicted, but I've seen a lot of the mainstream media try to claim that these price increases are due to Russia's attack on Ukraine, not the Biden administration anti-energy agenda. If that were true, How has our gas price per gallon increased by $1.60 from over the last year, not just the last 2 weeks of the Ukraine conflict? Since taking office, the Biden administration has frozen all new oil and gas projects on federal lands and implemented.
Madam President,
Senator from Ohio.
I'm here on the floor today to talk about Postal Service reform. We have another vote this afternoon, and this is incredibly important to the people I represent and all of us represent. It's important because the Postal Service is something people depend on for so much. This legislation that we're talking about has been in the works for years. It's a bill to try to save the post office from insolvency. And if we don't act on this, I believe in the next few years we'll be back here with a big bailout for the Postal Service because they're having a tough time financially. The combination of this legislation that we will pass and some internal reforms that the post office is making should be enough to get the post office back on track. The Postal Service has a Postmaster General right now who is absolutely committed to that, making the post office more effective, more efficient. But he needs a little breathing room, as he says, and that's what we're doing here in Congress. It doesn't cost the taxpayer anything. And by the way, if we don't do this in a few years, it would cost the taxpayers a lot in terms of a bailout that I'm afraid would happen. And the post office, again, is so important. It's definitely worth saving. Our country is pretty divided right now, let's be honest. But one.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you all for joining, to leaders from Congress, from labor, from the environmental movement, all of those who are gathered here. Thank you for what you did to make this day possible. And I especially want to thank Vice President Harris for her leadership on so many of our country's most pressing challenges, including the intersection between transportation and climate. I'm delighted by the announcement that she will be making today to bring public transit into the future so that people breathe cleaner air and our communities are protected against the climate crisis. In our economy, transportation is the single biggest contributor to climate change and is responsible for over 55% of nitrogen oxides, dangerous gases that can contribute to asthma and other respiratory diseases. So that also means transportation has to be a big part of the solution to the climate crisis and to air pollution. One of our best tools for doing that is public transit. Transit gets riders where they need to be, efficiently and affordably, with far less pollution than driving. And it's even good for drivers of cars, because it means less congestion and traffic on our roads. And transit is even better when it's clean transit, with modern electric buses that don't pollute at all. We often talk about the costs of failure on climate, and for good reason, but we should also celebrate what Americans stand to gain through our transformation to a cleaner transportation system. For example, we're talking about a lot of good jobs with the choice to join a union, building, maintaining, and operating